Hello, everyone. I hope you're all happy and healthy along with your respected families, wherever you're located on this God's green earth. In this episode of the Real Talks with Amini, I'm honored to have U.S. veteran Major Robert E. Cook, who is a Western civilization expert, an intellectual historian, and also an author of a newly released thriller, The Mahdi. And of course, the Mahdi offers a tale of espionage and artificial intelligence through the lens of a modern liberal Muslim who's dealing with faith and war. So maybe we can start with this, Bob. Welcome on the show. And tell us about the Mahdi. It is set and is exploring the complex and volatile region of Middle East. What inspired you to write a story that is set in that geography? And of course, Mahdi is a figure redeemer in Islam, a prominent one. What made you choose that name?
Well, in February, I think of 2018, I was reading The Economist magazine. There was an article about the Israeli government annexing Muslim lands with no compensation. That the World Court was against it, the International Court of Justice, and the United Nations. And I thought, well, that could be a story. And I started watching, and it was a story. And so I wrote a story. Seems a little dated now, about him being appointed by the Bedouin tribes, like the protagonist, Kahula, his Kuch is his nickname. His mother is Bedouin, his father is American. So he's an American Muslim. And he's been serving, and the Bedouin tribes appoint him to go to the Middle East and Israel and try and talk to the prime minister and get this straightened out with no compensation for taking away lands that have been in tribes for hundreds of years, not since 1948. And so it turned into a story. And it starts with him, going to the prime minister's office arranged by a friend of his in Mossad, and which is a different story. And he gets turned down, and the prime minister says, well, I wouldn't do that because my votes aren't where you want me to go with turning around this annexation of land. And what do you want me to do? And he said, well, fix it. And of course, the prime minister says, I won't do that. And he said, but you can talk to some of my people in Jerusalem. If you can convince them, you can convince me. So he goes to Jerusalem, gets turned down, drugged, thrown into a prison, and the story really begins there. And he's in prison with 6,000 Muslims, mostly Palestinians. And it ends up with a battalion of Orthodox right IDF attacking up through Gaza and getting beaten. But the important thing is that people started calling him the Mahdi, and he denied being the Mahdi. And he said, nobody knows who the Mahdi is other than a descendant of Muhammad. But he's here to make things better. And it's not me, but I'll be happy to help him. Later in the book, he tries to get the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to agree to think of himself as the Mahdi. And he said, oh, no, I'm not qualified. And so that was where the name came from. And the ending of the book is a lot more pleasant to what's going on today. The protagonist is able to convince Israel that they are in danger of outrunning their military technological lead. And if they do, they're a country the size of New Jersey, with a population of New Jersey, surrounded by 300 million Muslims. And so Israel sees the light, and Israel, the US, and Saudi Arabia agreed to fund a third of the costs of bringing the Middle East to modernity. And of course, it ignores Yemen and Afghanistan and anybody but the players right at hand. Well, that didn't happen. And I think Hamas probably broke it up because they didn't want it to happen. Maybe Iran didn't want it to happen, but we don't know any of those things for sure. But that was sort of the way it all began. And here I am watching slaughter in Iran and Lebanon. Well, Iran, I wrote a third book about Pulse. But there's a lot going on in Iran right now. A lot going on in Yemen. I see they're exchanging fire with Yemen. Israel has boots on the ground in Syria. Come on, I mean, those people want to get back to work. They're troops. They're wrecking the Israeli economy by having all these aggressors out there. Syria and Lebanon with Hezbollah and Gaza trying to destroy Gaza. Well, they've pretty well done it now. But anyhow, here we are at a different place. And I think it's a fun time to look at the Middle East and think about how we can just not solve this problem, but we can solve the tragedy of Afghanistan. We can solve Iraq with half Shia, half Sunni. So it's a fun thing to write and study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in your novel also you talk a lot about religion. Of course, you have written about religion in the past, but in the midst of this hot war that is going on, that is expanding in the Middle East, what is the objective there?
Well, there isn't going to be a solution to this problem in the Middle East without religion. Sure, politics will come along for the ride, but you must have religion. And the only religion of any size in the Middle East is Islam. And for 1,500 years, you've had Jews in that community because that was the intellectual base of much of the modernity in Islam before the 10th century. So it goes on. I just don't see how it can be solved without having a good neutral party come into the discussion now that Israel's blown it up pretty much and sort our way out to a movement to bring the Middle East to modernity. And it really must come.
Mm-hmm. And which country in that geography in the Middle East you think is best positioned, irrespective of their politics, to bring peace or to help bring peace, if not broadly, at least around Israel?
Well, I think broadly has to happen at the same time, and it's got to be something that represents the worst end of this conflagration they're going through. You know, they've been through the tragedy of the right wing of the Islamic faith. For example, in Afghanistan, the Taliban's taken over. They claim to be big time Muslims. I don't read the Quran the way they do, and there's a lot of tragedy going there. So why not have somebody that's gone through what's liable to happen in the closer Middle East, and that would be in Afghanistan. I mean, the Afghanis have to not step up. They've stepped up plenty, but they have to step up to this particular role as an interlocutor in the Middle East peace process. And it will start pretty soon, I would assume. So now's the time before Trump breaks a lot of glass to have that set up so that it can be discussed among the interested parties. In the case of Islam, I think it's Saudi Arabia because they have the money and the interest. In the case of Christianity, it's probably the U.S. and maybe Western Europe. And certainly in the case of Judaism, it's Israel. Problem is that Israel's trying to create a theocracy there. And that's not going to work if you don't have the people to pull it off. I mean, the Muslims might, these Jews don't.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Afghanistan a few times. So as a U.S. veteran who has experience in the Middle East and, of course, in broader Asia, how did you feel about the U.S. troops withdrawing from Afghanistan?
Well, it was just it's such a nightmare. It was handled so poorly. And they're still trying to assign blame among the U.S. politicians for it. And we didn't lose that bad. We lost 13 people, as I recall. Might have been more. But the Afghanis lost everything. And we just ran and closed the door, and it wasn't a good thing. But you know that as well as I did. It was just a nightmare of bad policy, bad thinking, bad planning. You know, I have a saying, Peter the Seventh Power, proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And that's what we had in Afghanistan and part of the U.S. We just didn't do that well at all. And I'm a military fan. I know there are better plans in place than that. But the politicians got their sweaty little hands on it. And that's what we have to prevent in the resolution of the Middle East problem is politicians get their sweaty little hands on it before the religious aspects can be sorted out. Because right now you have 2 billion Muslims watching Israel slaughter 2 million Palestinians. That's not a great start to a negotiation. And that has to be dealt with. I don't think you can deal with it without somebody in a semi-neutral position, a Muslim in a neutral position, sorting its way through that. And in this new administration, I can't believe they're going to take a lot of time to negotiate. There'll be people from state, people from defense, and hopefully somebody in this country that can pick up that role and say, yeah, we can talk to Iran. They're Sunnis, they're Shiites, but I can talk to them. And sort of bring the religion aspect together. And that's how this protagonist I have, Cahulan, he's gone down the classic route to Islamic scholarship. He has a master's from Oxford in Near Eastern Studies and all of that. So he goes around and argues that the schism between the Shiites and the Sunnis is apostasy in the eyes of Allah. And I think you can certainly read that into the Quran, and that's got to be sold. They've got to come together. One of the prices that the West has to pay to solve this Middle Eastern problem is get the Sunnis and Shiites together and have a cohesive Islamic region with Muslims that get the program.
And to come back to Afghanistan, given the current situation in Afghanistan of how the Taliban are ruling in the country, a brutal crackdown on all of the human rights, particularly women's rights and freedom and dignity of the people, and the situation that is there. Basically, the country has no legitimate government, no legitimate leaders, and so how do you see the situation in Afghanistan based on where you read and look at it? How do you assess it?
Well, I just happened to have seen a picture yesterday of 6th grade girls in tears because that was the end of their education. And that's just a nightmare. We have to get women everywhere, but particularly those in Afghanistan that are being brutalized back onto the world stage. I mean, you're going to do without Madame Curie because she's female and that kind of thing. There are a lot of waste efforts by the Taliban. I don't understand that religion, and I don't want to take the time to try to understand it because I'm not sure it's consistent logistically or logically, but maybe. Anyhow, I think that in the U.S., they, as we do, they're just trying to ignore it for as long as they can. And that's why I think there's an opportunity, because if we get to say, yes, let's fix it the way they say, we'll say it without a lot of analysis. So the analysis and the positioning has to be done up front by somebody who knows what they're doing as an interlocutor. And I think it's a huge opportunity for Afghanistan. But right now for the Middle East, and Afghanistan will come into the overall solution if the person's doing their job well.
Yeah. And what the Taliban are doing is contrary to all of the Islamic teachings. It's completely against the fundamentals. This is what they're doing is basically terrorism, terrorizing the whole population. So it is really imperative for a moderate narrative to come up and counter this extremist group. But this moderate narrative needs the support, of course, from the Western liberal societies, and that's where I think a lot of us are looking for support for countering this extremist narrative. But also, aside from the domestic aspect, the Taliban have allowed all of the terrorist groups, Al Qaeda, ISIS-K, all of you name it, all of them are right now in Afghanistan. And given the fact that Pakistan, just neighboring Afghanistan, is also in a very fragile situation, given the fact that they do have nuclear weapons, and there are concerns about what if these weapons fall in the wrong hands. Are you concerned about that part of geography?
Well, I'm not concerned about nuclear weapons because if one is mislaid and they detonate in the U.S., I mean, they'll turn wherever it came from into cinders and glass in a minute, but that won't help anybody here. I'm concerned that we find a way to create a political environment that will satisfy the religious requirements. And Pakistan would be happy to not be in China's backyard. I mean, if you read the terms in the Belt and Road contracts, I mean, they're not pretty. And the days of colonialism are supposed to be over, but they may be starting again. And we need to get Afghanistan away from that environment. But the Taliban doesn't work for me. They're just a bunch of thugs, in my mind. And they can fight, they can grow poppies, but I don't know that there's a lot else that they've demonstrated they can do. And I don't know where they're taking it. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's basically a destructive group. It's the annihilist. They're sending all of the opiums here, the Western countries, basically trying to bring down the Western civilization, and they are working with elements in China. They're working with elements in Putin's circle, and they're also working with elements of IRGC in Iran. There's all of these theocracies, or some people who call them as axis of evil, are right now in bed with these Taliban terrorists, where they have created this umbrella of terrorism that they would unleash against the U.S. and their allies, and we have seen some of the terrorist incidents in Europe, and we've seen some infiltration within the U.S. They have arrested a bunch of people who have claimed to be ISIS-K, but we know they're all Taliban. That they wanted to attack the U.S. during the election day. They wanted to assassinate President Trump. And all of these incidents, it's all tied to Afghanistan, where since the Taliban have taken charge, they have basically unleashed all of this terrorism, with different names, of course, with different names.
If somebody can convince Trump and his new national security advisor of that, what he'll say is fix it. But he's not a pleasant negotiator. He will, if he thinks the Taliban is a problem, he'll say, how many are there and where are they? If they know the answer to that, it'll be an ugly day for the Taliban. And that's fine. You won't solve the problems. But all that, the problems that you mentioned are fodder for somebody who's able to deal with the diplomatic community in the U.S., the State Department, get DOD in the act and say, yeah, let's see if we can sort this out before it gets ugly. And one of the things that person who's going to be the neutral person will have going for him is this is a new day in Washington. I mean, Trump says, I want this fixed. And he's willing to break glass to do it. And you just have to make sure that it's not your bottle he breaks. And I think there's an opportunity to do that because the Taliban has no representation. The IRGC is aligned with the religious leadership, but there's still a big Iranian community, great engineering community that's not in that way at all. So we probably can't destroy Iran, but we might be able to destroy the Taliban.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we need to, I think, before another event happens, and people say, the 9/11 happened, so it will not get repeated. I tell them, well, the Taliban got repeated. So if the Taliban got repeated and it's the same Taliban and much worse, and Al Qaeda is back there, so you never know. Maybe if we don't do anything about it, then something big will happen. So maybe hopefully this time we will act preemptively and get rid of them before they come after us. So you mentioned Iran and that the possibility of how that could be handled. I'm hearing chatters from the people who are working around the new administration that they might prioritize, getting rid of the mullahs from Iran and of course the Taliban, who might be recognized as Taliban as terrorists, and that will pave the way for actions. What do you think is the more logical policy proposal for the new administration to deal with these extremists?
I think that if it was me, I wouldn't be too greedy. I mean, I don't care if the Taliban live or die, but I would try to find an arrangement that made it hard for them to eat. And if you can free the majority of people in that country, then it's the same thing it's always been, just a grind. And as a new administration sorts out the Middle East, I suspect there won't be as much support from the IRGC or from others for the Taliban. And now's the time for somebody to pretend that they're not trying to sort out Afghanistan and sort out the whole Middle East.
Yeah.
And make sure that you have Afghanistan's concerns in your front pocket. And maybe we'll see how it goes, but I think the opportunity is ripe right now. Once the inauguration happens, big deal, lots of glass breaking going on. If you're set up with the right people before then, you can just go on about your business while he's sweeping up the broken glass, metaphorically. But we'll see.
Yeah. So in your experience, you have so many years of experience in different sectors and fields. What are some of the biggest challenges to the U.S. national security?
Well, people talk about drones being, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? We've been working on drone research since 2010. There was a drone deployed on a destroyer, the Ponce, in 2014, and it worked as well as expected in the test. But there's a real badass laser on the Gerald Ford. And the problem with laser shooting down drones, they don't have any trouble, but they shoot them down one at a time. And then they have to recharge. And you put the laser weapon on a carrier and use nuclear power to back it. And they say they can shoot down 10,000 rounds an hour. So the challenge is for the U.S. to keep up with that kind of thing, as China spends a lot of money trying to get a lead. And I don't have a lot of comfort that we're pulling ahead. I'm not terribly concerned that we're pulling behind until I figure out what they're going to do underseas, because the U.S. submarine fleet is what destroys everybody's confidence that they can attack us. I mean, you can blow up Los Angeles and San Diego and have one sub launch 3 Tomahawks and blow up the same number of people in China or anyplace else. And right now, I think that we've got to spend more on defense, and we are, but we're not spending it very logically. The procurement system's broken for sure. You can't get a new product out unless you go through Lockheed or somebody like that. DARPA is trying to fix it. The CIA venture firms trying to fix it. But we need to fix the procurement system in the U.S. And that's going to take a lot more attention than fixing the Middle East. It really will. So I don't know how to bring it together. Maybe you do. But it's a fun discussion. Mm-hmm. And I think that the day of manned aircraft are over. Probably manned forces on the ground will be over in 10 years with robots fighting robots. Cyber warfare, that's what scares me. having China in the middle of our network system. But that's a different life of mine. That's not the Middle East.
Hmm. Yeah. And do you predict there will be a war with China anytime soon?
Oh, in some form. Hopefully, it won't be kinetic. I hope we're done with kinetic wars. I think we will have economic disagreements at very serious levels. You could have kinetic war in Taiwan. I don't know what we do about that. If a kinetic war in the South China Sea and expect the Philippines to defend themselves, I don't think so. But I don't think it happens organically where we start screaming at each other and shooting little nukes and then big nukes. I would expect that sooner or later Russia will pop a nuke somewhere, just in the battlefield. As much to say, what are you going to do about that? As anything. And we're not going to nuke Moscow. That'll throw some hate in the game. And that's why it's such a great opportunity to be under the covers, sorting out the Middle East problem and trying to get the girls in Afghanistan in 7th grade and getting those monsters out of power.
Yeah.
The way we pulled out was just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if that had been Trump, he'd have taken one last swipe at the Taliban, and then he'd pulled out. And that would have been a painful swipe.
Yeah.
Because he'd have said, well, give it everything you got. That's a lot. And we never did that. So I feel so bad about that.
Yeah.
You don't have the attention of the American people when you talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think Trump was planning to fully withdraw from Afghanistan, because their plan was to keep the embassy open, keep 2,500 troops at least on the ground, and keep Bagram Air Base, which is really strategically located in that geography. But then it didn't go as he was planning when the change of administration happened. And in terms of China, I think they don't have the necessary, they don't have the power, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the technology and economic backbone, even though they do have the economy, but not the economy of a scale to be able to challenge the U.S. in a direct military confrontation. So I think they're following the template that the U.S. was following against the USSR, the Soviet Union, where they're right now investing on all of the non-state actors, on all of the groups that previously some U.S. even had some dealings with them. They are all being used right now by them, and they are unleashing them against the U.S. interest in the region. You saw what happened in Israel. You see what happens with Houthis and others, and all of these terrorist activities. I'm worried that, and I'm increasingly seeing this, that China is becoming more of a state sponsor of terrorism. And that's how they're trying to take on the U.S. along with Russians and Iranians, rather than a direct military confrontation.
I don't think they describe it as terrorism on their part. They're saying we're just doing the reach out that the U.S. did for all those years. The Belt and Road Initiative is our way of doing it. Reopening the Great Silk Road, all that stuff. And I don't know enough about what's going on to say that's a lie or it's not. But they're going to withhold rare earth minerals if we withhold oil, that kind of thing. So that's going to be ugly for a long time, I think. And I believe that Trump's going to run the administration based on tariffs. So I don't know how the revenues will come, but he'll have the ability to tariff China, and they'll have the ability to tariff us. And so he's very much a transactional guy, and I think you'll see that in the next 4 years, maybe the next 12, because Vance seems to be right on board with all that. Mm. How do you think it's going to sort through in the Middle East in particular?
Yeah, I think, with the U.S. Focus winding down on Ukraine, if there is some sort of a deal there, of course, the next priority would be the Middle East. And I think that the Israelis and the Trump team is already in discussion on how they're gonna engage in the Middle East. And I think the priority list on top of it that I've heard is the IRGC of Iran, the Iranian mullahs. I think they're trying to go after them We know that you cannot negotiate with terrorists, and even if you try to negotiate with them the same way that the U.S. tried to negotiate with Taliban, it didn't go anywhere. So it will not go anywhere with Iran. And of course, Trump has an experience as an experience with the deal that the U.S. had signed, the JCPOA that he came out of, because he realized that when you try to negotiate with these terrorist states, the terms of those deals are never favorable to the liberal states. So the only way remaining is to challenge them, is to pressurize them, to sanction them, and hopefully, I think they might be working on some sort of a program to change the regime. I think Israelis have the capability, and the people of Iran are ready to rise up with all of the tensions that are brewing inside the country and the opposition that are becoming much more unified outside of Iran, that hopefully we'll see a change of regime in Iran. And similarly, the same program could be adopted in Afghanistan as well.
I would like to say change the regime in Israel.
Yeah.
And get the right wing out of the prime minister's office, but they're breeding like rabbits. So if it doesn't happen soon, it won't happen at all. The survival, that's what worries me, the existential risk that Israel is taking in the Middle East. Because if they don't get this right, in 10 years, they won't be around. You say, well, that's a long time. That's a long time. But what they have to do in the next 5 years is resettle Gaza, resettle the West Bank, and pay reparations in Lebanon, somehow deal with the Houthis, and make Iraq happy. That's a big list, and it's not going to happen easily in the next 3 or 4 years. And in 10 years, you still have a theocracy, maybe the size of Pennsylvania this time, but not a huge population, and surrounded by 300 million Muslims. It just doesn't work. You can't slaughter 2 million and expect them all to roll over and say, well, you're the good guys. It's just not going to work that way. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I worry a lot more about how do we get out of it in a big way instead of a small way.
Yeah.
The United States has committed unlimited support for Israel. I don't know that I voted for that. And I particularly did not vote for any U.S. boots on the ground over there. And we've had people on station for 9 months in the Red Sea. We're going to leave them there forever? This needs to be sorted out. It needs to be sorted out fairly quickly. It's a national security risk.
Yeah. So what would you advise the incoming administration of President Trump on what should be their key areas of focus to protect the U.S. homeland, of course, secure the U.S., and to set it on a centrist stage to lead the way in this century?
Well, I have opinions that I'm going to share about what he's going to do, but I think he has to deal with the deficit first. He says he can bring the deficit from 6% to 3%. That's $4 trillion. That's a lot of money. And we don't have $4 trillion to cut out of anything. So I think he revalues gold to 15,000 an ounce or so. There's the $4 trillion. And he starts running the country as if he can afford it again. And he will not be kind, as he hasn't been to President Trudeau, for example, Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, to anybody that gets in his way. So I think that's the way he's going to operate. I've got the big stick, I'm going to use it. Here's the rules. And if he does that, if the rules for the Middle East are pretty well on their way, he'll get behind it. If not, he'll push it out of the way. So it's time to sort out what we're going to do. And Afghanistan is a great example of that. We just can't let that go on with the travesty that took place because we had a vice president that was beyond his mental peak, to be kind. So we'll see. Your idea is probably as good as mine is what it'll do. But it's pretty clear to me what we should do. those of us that aren't in government to try to help bring a better view of Muslims and Islam to the U.S. and use that to sort out the Middle East. Right now, 3.5 million Muslims here, and they're not very well thought of. Most of them are not. They're well thought of. They're not well seen. They're in Hamtramck, Michigan, and Detroit, and L.A. and New York. But one of the things I hope to do with this set of books, this 4 books of the Cooch series from Cooch was the first one, was druggies in South America. He speaks fluent Spanish, but you can do anything with your protagonist that you do up front. He's pretty skilled. Anyhow, second book's about Yemen. Third book's about Iran. In Iran, the solution that I chose there was a preemptive nuclear attack on Iran, where you warn the Iranian army, but not the IRGC, to get out of the way because we're coming with electromagnetic pulse. So that was a fun book. Mm-hmm. And this one, was Israel and Gaza, and it blew up in my face. I thought I had it all sorted out, and it would take a while to get there. It's going to take longer to get there now. So I think if we had a video series on Netflix or someplace that really looked at the world through the logical lens of a moderate Muslim American, we would go light years in convincing people that there is an answer in the Middle East. Right now, they just don't think about it. What they do think about has been colored by the misbehavior of the terrorists, the hard Islamic terrorists. And there's hard right people in our countries, hard right people in their countries. I don't believe that Wahhabis are in any place to carry any water these days, but they're still there. As MBS tries to modernize Saudi Arabia. Well, some people in this country that are in hard right and hard left are going to have trouble, especially in hard left. They destroyed our school system. That's something what to do in Afghanistan, put a whole new school system in place. Now's the time to figure out what it's going to be when nobody cares. I've got an answer for that in one of my books. In fact, in the Mahdi. And you just have to teach the children as individuals. They've been through different experiences. There's a saying in the curriculum I favor in the U.S. called direct instruction. And that saying is, there are no failing students. There are only failing teachers. And we'll bring technology to the teaching table. And I think someplace like Afghanistan would be a wonderful place to prove its worth.
Yes.
It's got to be sold. It's got to be discussed.
Yep.
Got to be fit into a program.
Yep.
None of that happens easily.
Yeah.
I don't envy anybody in Washington that's trying to fix that. I agree that they have to. It's just a hard job.
Yeah.
And see.
Yeah, and we need to reopen the schools for girls first. I think that would be a major policy success, a major achievement for the incoming administration, and particularly for President Trump, if he comes in and get rid of the Taliban, help them to topple down, and for the regime to collapse, and freedom for more than 20 million women and girls in Afghanistan. I think that it's very easy, it's quick to achieve, and it will be a very big achievement for his administration and for his team. And I think that will be something that hopefully it will be on top of their agenda to do so. And then beyond that, of course.
I doubt that's on top of their agenda. There's the problem and the opportunity. I mean, if somebody says, here's what we do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mm-hmm. Well, how much does it cost? What's the chance you can make it work? Can I negotiate? The hell with it. Give it a try. Yeah, it's that hard and that easy. I don't think he's going to spend any time worrying about Afghanistan or anything other than getting Israel off his back for the next 2 years. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, you're back in that neck of the woods. You might talk to those people. I don't. I used to talk to them. Yeah. Guys I talk to now are retired 4-stars. And they know a lot, but they're not about that political kind of thing. And you guys back there, you can figure that stuff out. I think there's going to be a lot of people looking for a job in 30 days. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're working on it, Bob. We're working to make sure that that's on the list.
Good.
It's
There
so.
should be some good talent available in the next 60 days. So you can figure out who you want to hire and probably get a pretty good deal with them. And there'll be a lot fewer people working for the government, which is why we're going to get it done now.
Yeah,
We'll see.
yeah. Let's
Fun
see. I mean,
talk.
yeah, it's I understand the concern, but I also see a lot of opportunities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wish you had luck with it. And anybody else that takes it on, you need some luck. But if you can't baffle them with bullshit, you dazzle them with hard work.
Yes.
And it's going to be a lot of hard work between now and inauguration to put those pieces in place. And once they're in place, they can slip into any kind of mesh. It's just that they've got to be started. I don't think you have his attention. I don't think he's offended deep in his soul by what's gone on in Afghanistan. He's angry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Says it was stupid, but I don't think you get his attention. If it's not already on the table, it'll be a while before you get there. So good luck with it.
So the argument that we are having, Bob, is that we don't want him to get offended by something big happening in the United States. That's our argument, that he shouldn't wait for something terrible to happen for the U.S. interest in the region or the U.S. Homeland for him to pay attention. And hopefully, I think he would understand. The team around him understands it. So hopefully, through the team that is around him, that he will understand. So let's see how much success we will have there, Bob. Are you hopeful about the future? What do you think? The future of the world, future of the U.S. Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic?
Let me talk about Trump for a second and my take on him. And I read his book, The Art of the Deal, and I've watched him for quite a while. And he's a transaction guy. He wants to do deals. And I don't think you get to him with anything terribly conceptual other than he can't afford the deficit that's on the table. And if he revalues gold to anything like $15,000 an ounce, there'll be a lot of glass broken, a lot of figuring out the Social Security needs, the military needs, what Israel needs. And I don't think that they come around anytime real quickly to the day-to-day. That's why it has to get started now. I don't believe he get his attention after 1st of February. Other than, yeah, go ahead. And that's enough. That's all we need. If you put it together right, he'll take a lot of criticism and he'll say, yeah, I don't care. That's Donald J. Trump, soon to be president of the United States. I even voted for him.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people did because it wasn't working the way it was going. And I think it's good for people that want to sort out injustices in the Middle East too. We'll see.
Yeah. Do you have any messages to the American people, to the Afghan people, people of Iran?
Nothing for the American people that they haven't heard from 50 politicians, as opposed to 5,000. But for the Afghani people, I mean, the first message is say, I'm sorry, we really blew that. But that doesn't buy you much in today's politics. I mean, I think a lot of people are sorry. I think you hunker down and look for a chance to help make it better. I don't know. I don't think you make a lot of impact by burning yourself on the steps of the mosque. Iran's interesting. I believe there's a lot of people in Iran, just as there are in Israel, the liberal portion of both countries, that aren't happy with the leadership. And I don't get the sense that, other than the mullahs, that the Shiites are all that convinced that they couldn't be Sunni if the day was a little longer. Yeah, there's a lot of hadith, a lot of research, but there's nothing you can get from Allah or from Muhammad that says they should be in separate sects, killing each other the way they did in Iraq. No, I don't. So I think there's a chance for those two, to Iran and Israel, to get different leadership. And if they do, Afghanistan is right square at the table, because Chinese are messing there, Russians are messing there, and the Taliban aren't cooperating. You know, they're becoming more terrorists rather than less. There's no government there. So they have a problem, but I think we have to sort out the kinetic problem before we sort out this kinetic problem before we sort out the next one. And I hope it doesn't go boom. Maybe it goes boom here. If it does, it'll be the same as before. A really strong politician-directed reaction. You know, turn that place to glass. Well, it's not that hard to do, but the military, all they can say is, "Are you sure about that, boss?" That's a bad idea, but they'll do what they're told within reason. And I think Trump will have them pretty well where he wants them. But you guys have good luck with that. It's going to get it very interesting for everybody that lives within 200 miles of Washington the next 60 days.
Yeah.
I haven't heard yet whether they got a continuing resolution on the budget. But if they revalue gold, they won't need it. They'll have $4 billion a room and everything that Doge people can do to reduce ongoing costs. So we'll see. It's fun to talk about, though. Thank you for asking me to talk about it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure having you, Bob. I really enjoyed our conversation. There's a lot that I can ask from you, but I wouldn't want to take much of your time. Maybe in the next episodes, we'll bring you back to discuss more in detail about some of the things that is going to happen with the new administration setting in. Then we can discuss and evaluate some of the policy options then. So for now, this is the end of our episode. This was Major Robert E. Cook, U.S. veteran, philanthropist, shooter, Scout Eagle, really a prominent figure and intellectual Western civilization expert that we discussed the Middle East, discussed Afghanistan, discussed U.S. national security and U.S. policy towards that region with the new administration. So until next episode, God bless you. God bless Afghanistan. God bless United States, and God bless our world. And thank you, Bob, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice talk. Thank you.